You take the E out and you replace it with a U. They're dumb. They are Democrats. You know why? Because their policies are dumb. Their policies are very dumb. All of that policies. Did you see they did an autopsy on why they lost the election? And they said you lost the election because of Trump primarily. But other than Trump, you lost the election because you had crappy candidates and you had bad policy. And they didn't know how to speak properly, and they weren't smart people, and various other reasons. They spent $10 million for the autopsy. It was called an autopsy. And they had typos. Jackson, they had typos in every other sentence. They had misspelled words. They had commas in the wrong location. They gave them $10 million for the autopsy. I could have given them the autopsy without any charge at all. I said you had one candidate named Sleepy Joe Biden. But
you have President Trump speaking at a campaign event for Congressman Mike Lawler, and he's giving his own summation of the autopsy there that the Democrats had for the 2024 presidential race. This is kind of like maybe the cheaper version of Hillary Clinton's book entitled "What Happened." That book did not last well. Let's get to our guest. Tim Murtaugh joins us now, longtime Republican communications strategist, founder of the Line Drive public affairs firm, and senior advisor for the 2024 Trump campaign and communications director for 2020 Trump campaign. Tim, what a pleasure to have you back on the show with us. Obviously, you get to hear President Trump there giving his version, and the only way that President Trump can, of the autopsy. You tell me from your perspective, Tim. Have you read this autopsy? Did the Democrats get it right, at least in their postmortem?
I have looked at it, and I can tell you what, if Donald Trump says he would have done it at no charge, they paid $10 million. No, I wouldn't go that far. I would have charged. I'll do it for $1 million. Okay. I'm not going to say no charge. I won't go make them pay full freight, but maybe $1 million. And here's why they lost. They lost because they had a candidate whose decrepitude was obvious to everyone, but they foolishly tried to cover it up in Joe Biden. And then they forced him off the ballot, and they rammed in Kamala Harris in his place without any kind of primary or without any input from the voters whatsoever. And she only turned out to be the worst candidate in the history of humankind.
Ever.
Not only in this country, but in any country around the world, in any election since the beginning of humanity. She's the worst candidate of all time. So that's why they lost. And now I will send my invoice for $1 million to the DNC. But what they left out is most notable for what was not discussed. They didn't talk about who was to blame and what impact would it had on the race to have Joe Biden's decrepitude, which they tried to cover it up. They should have known they weren't going to slip that past everybody. They don't address any of that about how they tried to cover up Joe Biden's incredible cognitive declining position there. They also didn't talk about anything involving the Gaza conflict or Israel or anything like that. And now from the left, they're saying, oh, you didn't talk about how we didn't support the victims of the genocide enough. But what that means to me is that they decided not to address the anti-Semitism, which is going on, that's rampant inside the Democratic Party. Yeah. And they're afraid. The actual autopsy should be the extreme left killed the Democratic Party as we know it, but no one is brave enough to stand up to the extreme left in that party, and so they get this lackluster autopsy, which learns nobody nothing.
Yeah, so. And I completely agree with your assessment from the perspective that you have. Incredible to have that with us here on the show. We're speaking with Tim Murtaugh, who was the senior advisor for 2024 Trump campaign. I wonder if you read through when reading through this autopsy. Because I'm not really thinking that they're positioning themselves any better for 2028. When I think back to, what did Kamala stand for? What would have been her, shining star policy that she could get through? I can't really even think of one. All she stood for was Trump is the great Satan and we need to beat him. And then she would cackle. That's really what I got from the last one.
And also they did us enormous favors back then because she refused to break away from Biden in any way. Remember her famous thing on The View, what would you do differently? And she said, nothing comes to mind.
Yeah.
Right. So basically it would be Biden 2.0 and that was ridiculous. And so that was really easy for us to run against. But this autopsy is proof of the same problems that they've got that caused them to lose in 2024. It's the insane adherence to wokeness. It's the fear of calling out the radical left for being the radical left. They were afraid of that. Remember Kamala Harris? Heck, we ran a TV ad that was so successful. She was afraid to say that it's not okay to spend taxpayer money for sex change operations for prisoners. She was afraid to say that we should not spend money that way. She was afraid of it. And now here they are with this autopsy, and they're still afraid to point out that it's the crazy ideas from the left which harmed them. And they were the ideas that they were afraid to run away from 2024. They haven't learned a blessed thing. The radical left is still in charge of that party, and they're going to continue to lose elections until they recognize it. And here's you and me hoping, thank God, that I don't see any evidence right now that they've learned it yet. So
yeah,
I hope
a $10 million study that they put out that makes me as a conservative at heart that wants to see America first be something that my kids grow up understanding blessed them, and they want to continue to support it generationally. I want to see that continue on, and it seems as though the left hasn't understood any of this. There's something about the authenticity of Donald Trump that cannot be replicated. That's by virtue of being authentic in the way that he is. I feel like he took the time to actually consider the actual American person. We're sitting here smack dab in the middle of the country in St. Louis, Missouri, talking to people in red state Missouri, blue state Illinois. But there are so many things that this president, then candidate, previously president, talked about that made sense, like he saw us here. And I can't relate to Donald Trump. I don't feel like Donald Trump could relate to me, a suburban mother of four, sitting here in the heart of the Midwest. But for some reason, he's able to connect. How does he get past all the consultants and all of the different things that get thrown at politicians like, don't do that, because he seems to bust through every single one of those walls and stick the landing.
Yeah, he does. Well, listen, Donald Trump listens to advice, but in the end, he really does. He takes input from all kinds of people, and he considers all sorts of opinions from everyone around him, right up to the time where it's too late to change his mind. Like once he makes a decision, that's that. But right up until the time where he says, okay, I've decided, he's willing to take input. And I think that's really one of his strengths. And it's why you see that McDonald's campaign event that he did near the end in 2024, he pulled that off. That was one of the greatest, I got to say, actually, the greatest retail politics event that I have ever seen. And almost no one would have been able to pull that off. Let's not forget that the guy is a billionaire. And there he is in McDonald's, slinging French fries and all that and working the drive-thru window. And he pulled it off because he never pretends to be something that he's not. He was in there. He was Donald Trump billionaire doing that, but he was having fun. And Kamala Harris would have gone in there and pretended to, be a line worker at McDonald's, and she would have told that fable that she made up about how she worked at McDonald's when she was in college or something. Or maybe it's true, but it was in Canada and she never wanted to say that. I bet you that could be true.
Well,
but the fact is, he pulled it off because he doesn't try to pretend. He said, like, yep, all right, what are we doing now? I've never done this before. Let's go. He's not trying to act like he knows what's going on. That's why it works, and I think the Democrats are going to be up against it in the midterms too. I hope we have a minute here. We can talk about messaging coming up in the midterms, because Democrats, once again, they don't learn any lessons. They think they're on the right side of some things, and I don't believe that they are.
I would love to follow up with that. Tim Murtaugh, speaking with us right now, served as a senior advisor for the 2024 Trump campaign, because I see in a midterm sense, and I know Spencer Pratt isn't Donald Trump, but Spencer Pratt is being a genuine dude who has an interest in the locality of what he's trying to do there. And again, it seems to me like he's not trying to win the political game. He's actually trying to win Americans' votes. And Donald Trump, in my lifetime, I'm in my early 40s. In my lifetime, I've never seen anyone do what Donald Trump did. But he's going to be out of the picture as a candidate here. How do Republicans continue to win with that genuine connection when the Democrats still, Stephen Colbert, every story I look at yahoo.com today is about Colbert. Who cares about Colbert? Yeah. He's some hero.
They're missing the point. They just the media who thinks that regular people care about some moron like Stephen Colbert, they can waste all the ink and all the pixels that they care to waste on Stephen Colbert will have exactly zero impact on the upcoming elections. What's going to win it for Republicans in the midterms? And I do think that they have a better than an even chance of retaining the majority in both chambers of Congress after these midterms. They're going to win it just be the same reason why Donald Trump won it, because we're right on the issues. The issues that got Donald Trump elected market are still the same. Who's going to keep your taxes low? Republicans. Who's going to fight crime? Republicans. Who's going to secure the border? Republicans. Who's going to fight illegal immigration? Republicans. All the things that people care about. The safety of their communities, the economy, all of these different things, they're going to be Republican issues. The price of gas. Let me tell you, Joe Biden, on the first day that Joe Biden was president of the United States, his entire administration set to work on trying to increase the price of fossil fuels as a policy decision. That was their goal. That's what they wanted to do because they want people to move away from fossil fuels. It was their intention. That is not the same thing as a temporary spike in prices because you're trying to rid the world of the worst dictatorial supporting regime on the planet, which is what's happening in Iran. Another question that the Democrats think they always own the answer to is the price of health care. Let me tell you this, that Democrats and the health insurance CEOs are an unholy alliance. They've been in bed for decades. They got everything that these healthcare CEOs, health insurance specifically, got everything they wanted from Obamacare, trillions of dollars in taxpayer money since then. They got everything they wanted from Joe Biden with the Inflation Reduction Act and everything else. So Republicans have identified that. President Trump has identified that. Health insurance is a huge problem. Now, another one that the president and the administration and also Jason Smith, who's the Republican chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee.
Missouri, right here.
Hospitals. Yes. Hospitals. The price of hospitals, hospital stays and everything that occurs at a hospital is a main driver of the overall cost of healthcare. 300% increase in the price of hospital stays just in the last 20 years. That is 3 times the rate of inflation. And they are exploiting a federal program, a little known federal program to most people, but it's called the 340B program. And it's supposed to help low income and rural people with the price of drugs, but it does not. That doesn't mean the program's not being used because it is. $290 billion have been routed through this program. And what they're supposed to do is pass on discounts on drugs that they get to their customers. But they do not. Not only do they not pass on the discount, they keep that money, the extra money that they're supposed to. They also hike it up by, in some cases, as much as 10,000% for the price of drugs. And then this is $290 billion that's basically profit for these hospitals, in some cases, raking money out of poor and rural areas and using that money to build a hospital in a rich area.
It's outrageous.
So none of this it's called the 340B drug pricing program. Nearly $300 billion run through it since Obamacare passed. All profit for these hospitals, which are supposed to be, by the way, nonprofit hospitals. And it's driving up the cost of overall healthcare costs. You got the health insurance companies and now the hospitals. President Trump and the Republicans are on the case. They're going after this. And this is going to be a big problem for Democrats because Democrats are up to their eyeballs in complicity with all of this stuff.
Tim Murtaugh with us. If I could squeeze in one last question here, there's a report out from the National Committee Finance update that says the RNC cash on hand, $124 million. DNC cash on hand, $14.4 million, and $17.5 million in debt. The RNC having no debt. Do you believe those numbers are those accurate numbers? And is this what the Republicans need in order to get the message that you just delivered to us out to the masses and to get them to show up to vote?
Yeah, I believe those numbers. I absolutely do. I don't know if they're like down to the dollar accurate. But I do believe that the Republican National Committee and some other, the other associated committees definitely have in excess of 9 figures of money in the bank account. So well over $100 million. And I do know that the Democrats are, as a group, underwater and in negative number territory. Now, they have some mega donors on their side, no question. They can make up ground. But I got to tell you, it really does show you sort of the state of the parties, where I think the media and the Democrats really are very complacent about this because they know the historical trend is undeniable. The party of the president typically loses seats in both chambers of Congress. President Trump already defied this once. In 2018, in his first midterms, in the first term, he actually gained 2 seats in the Senate. So he already defied this partially, the historical trend once. And I think a lot of the media and their pals in the Democrats think that they're just going to rely on that history, and the real actual landscape favors Republicans. After all this redistricting and the way things are shaking out, I mean, you have in 2018, the first midterms, according to the Cook Political Report, going into them, the ratings were there were 30 toss-ups, but among the safe seats, Democrats had an edge 210 to 195. So a 15-seat edge for Democrats as far as safe seats go, with the toss-ups still having to go back in 2018. Right now, Inside Elections has it 215 Republicans to 206 Democrats. So a 9-seat edge for Republicans with only 14 toss-ups. And of course, you have to get to 218 to have the majority in the House. That means Republicans, if Inside Elections is correct with its handicapping, Republicans only need to win 3 out of 14 House seats that are toss-ups in order to retain the majority. That's extremely doable. 3 out of 14, really, if you're discounting the safe seats. Republicans really are in position. I think they keep the Senate.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens in Maine, I think Republicans keep the Senate.
Well,
and in the House, boy, you give a financial edge to guys like James Blair and Chris LaCivita and Donald J. Trump, and they're going to win some elections. I can tell you that.
yeah, I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat to find out what a second half of a second-term Donald Trump administration can do with the House and with the Senate. Let's go.
Yeah, it would be great. Let's go.
Be great.
Exactly right.
Tim Murtaugh, pleasure to have you back on with us. Thank you for your time.
You bet, Annie. Anytime. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye. Great to have him on with us once again. Longtime Republican communications strategist, founder of the Line Drive public affairs firm, and senior advisor for the 2024 Trump campaign, as well as communications director for the 2020 Trump campaign. He also writes for the Washington Times as well. And his book, you should check it out. It's called Swing Hard. Highly recommend.